Welcome back to another edition of The House at Allenville. This is episode 28. I'm Scott Kinmartin. With me, as always,
Greg Vollmer.
And today we're going to talk about a recap of the Bills at Bengals, but really it's going to be about DAMAR HAMLIN, the safety for the Buffalo Bills, number 3. And he went into cardiac arrest on the field. It was in the first quarter, 9 minutes and 2 seconds in. He got up after tackling T. Higgins, fell down, as you've probably seen. He collapsed. And right away I told you that it did not look good because they cut away from it. And you didn't see it until the replay, how bad it was. But when they had cut back to the shot, you could see that his legs weren't moving. And I immediately started worrying. It brought me back to Kevin Everett in 2007 when he was paralyzed on the field. And he's since been able to recover, and right now we're in the middle of hoping that...
And that was the very first play of the game, opening day against the Broncos in Buffalo.
It was a kickoff. Yeah. And this was a very somber moment. We were both at the Buffalo Bills Backers Bar in Portland, Oregon.
Cheerful bullpen, yeah. It was full.
It was, and it had good energy right away. Bengals marched on the field and scored right on Trey White. We're like, oh, maybe he's still not at 100%. They look good. You know, they came for blood. And then we pretty much were answering back, and then we kind of stalled out on like the 10-yard line and kicked a 23-yard field goal or something. The Bengals got the ball back, and Mixon ran the ball, and then Burrow threw it to T. Higgins right across the middle. Hamlin came up from his safety spot. Looked like a routine pop. Went down. As he stood up, he just kind of went stiff and then limp and then fell back. And he fell right into Joe Mixon's leg. And then Joe Mixon immediately saw his eyes must have been rolling. His tongue might have been in the back of his throat. And he's just pointing like immediately. These guys knew. I mean, there were guys within seconds taking their helmets off and getting down on their knee. It wasn't like a normal injury, even one that ends up in an ambulance where, you know, eventually they're giving the thumbs up. It was scary.
Mm-hmm.
And to see his legs not move at all, and then his hand started coming up, and it made me think of the Tua injury when Matt Milano tackled him.
The fencing response.
But in this case, they were taking his arms and trying to do something with his shoulder pads, and then you knew it was bad. I was recording the game at home, so as soon as I left the pub and came home, I watched it on replay, not because I'm twisted in the head, but because I wanted to better understand what was going on. And it happened so fast that the next hour was basically dead silence, other than the anchor sitting there trying to fill that dead air. And it was just a moment that we'll all remember. And imagine those players. But the most impressive part were the paramedics and the team doctors were out there within 10 seconds. What happened was Hamlin ended up going into cardiac arrest. His heart basically went out of rhythm right after the hit. You literally have to hit like the heartbeat wave goes a certain way, and it was just on the T wave on the way down and then back up. And you hit just right, which is, like Josh Allen said, the freakiest of freak accidents.
It's like getting struck by lightning.
So obviously that cut off his breathing. So when he stood up, it was the only oxygen and blood flow he had left before his heart had stopped. They went into CPR to resuscitate him, and they got a pulse back, but he wasn't breathing on his own. So they had to get out the AED, and you guys have seen it all. You know all the stuff. I mean, we have a list of, in chronological order, what happened. But the important part was that the medics were out there within 10 seconds. He was being resuscitated and put on a defibrillator for 10 minutes with an ambulance out there within 4 minutes. And for the next hour, we all waited there with bated breath trying to figure out, is this guy going to survive, or did we just watch a guy die on the field? When you really knew it was serious is when you saw Josh Allen's face. You saw Trey White crying. You saw Stephon Diggs fighting back the tears.
And the cornerback room was the...
Yeah. Safety and corners are the DBs. You know, they're the defensive backs that study the defense together, and they have the same coaches. And when you see
the film room together, cracking jokes, the brotherhood. There's brotherhood on the whole team, obviously, but like when you're in your own positional groups like that.
And it was just plays before that Taron Johnson got hurt when Hayden Hurst kind of drove him into the ground. It wasn't dirty, but it was a play where he didn't stop until that whistle blew, maybe even slightly after, but momentum kind of put him over top of him.
If we hadn't gotten good news today, this afternoon, we obviously got some amazing news about Hamlin's recovery and improvements that everyone was waiting to hear. And so if we hadn't gotten like some kind of reassurance, I feel like it wouldn't be too appropriate to talk about some of these things, but I do want to mention it. The Bengals came out swinging, and you could tell that leading up to this game, before the chaos ensued and something happened that no one in a million years would have imagined, the way this Monday night game would end up, we had talked about how much trash talk was what seemed to be coming from the Bengals side and sending it to the media.
They were backing it up.
And they were. I mean, you watch this game and their tight end, he jumps over Poyer and gets up and is pumping his chest.
Yep. And then they had a running back do it as well, where he tried jumping over someone.
Yeah,
it was physical.
And then you had a defensive tackle for the Bengals it was a cheap play. And this is again, this is minor details in regards to everything that happened with DAMAR Hamlin, but it did kind of get lost because of everything else that happened. But I still want to bring it up because we saw it with our own eyes, and what I saw, it bothered me. I don't know who was it for the Bengals. One of their edge rushers.
End,
he
89,
he went to the ground. Allen had already thrown the ball, and you could see him kind of look out of the corner of his eye to see where Allen was, and he continued to roll himself into Allen's leg. So
if you watch it in real time, he just does a barrel roll. But when they played it back, and you saw that he got on all fours as he was kind of catching himself from one tumble, and then he just kind of lunged.
It didn't look natural. If I was a fan of the Bengals, I think it would be tough for me to want to be like, yeah, he did something dirty, and so maybe it's easier being on a perspective of a Bills fan. But it definitely didn't look natural. Allen had to get his ankle wrapped up afterwards.
Yeah, but his knee hyperextended as well. So we went from them scoring right away over Trey White, and then Taron Johnson had gotten hurt on that series, and he went out. So we're like, well, damn, we're already down like the best slot corner in the league. Luckily, we had Teran Neal who could come in, and he was obviously on the field and devastated by the injury as well. The Cincinnati Bengals organization has been a class act. Zach Taylor went on the field to meet with Sean McDermott, and they together determined that it was best to go back into the locker room. You could hear McDermott redirecting his guys saying, locker room, locker room. And Zach Taylor kind of deferred to what McDermott wanted because it was his player, his team that was really shook by it. And they were all shook. But they needed to reset. Normally in these situations, as Joe Buck said on the call, after an injury like this, the guy gets carted off, wheeled off, driven off, and then they get 5 minutes to warm up again because there was some downtime. And these are pro athletes, and they're flinging their body. It's funny, not funny, but last episode we were just talking about, the idea of, is this stuff rigged, and what the sacrifice these guys put into the game and their bodies. That was the ultimate sacrifice. They talk about putting it all out there on the field, dying for your brothers. The dude's heart literally stopped on the field. And he was resuscitated by Denny Kellington, who is the assistant athletic trainer for the Bills.
I think that there's been a lot of hesitance to talk about anything other than DAMAR Hamlin this week, and I get it. And now that we have good news, not to say that just because we have good news of progress, that means we can just start talking about anything else. It's something that I had on my mind as well about that play that I perceived as dirty, and I just didn't want it to get lost in everything else because it did still happen, and that was something we've seen a lot of times where a player of any caliber get injured or hurt, and look, nothing compares to what happened to DAMAR Hamlin, but it was interesting that ultimately what we're trying to say is that you could see that all the overzealous confidence that the Bengals players were exuding compared to the silence of the Bills going into this game, you could tell that the Bengals were physically backing it up.
Yeah.
And
do you remember how chippy it got against the Chiefs a few years ago, where Allen got tackled, I want to say by Chris Jones, and he took the ball and flung it at him?
Yeah, that in the championship game.
Stakes are elevated now. This game, the winner of this, still had an opportunity for the first seed. Right now, we have to wait for the Chiefs on their cakewalk to win or lose against the Raiders, actually, and then we could still go for that first seed. But we got to get past the Bengals, right? No, not anymore. The game's officially been canceled. It was temporarily postponed, then delayed. Then they're like, okay, we're not gonna make up it, or we're not gonna make it up this week. Maybe in the future. And we all started speculating maybe after the Patriots week, there'll be a week 19, they'll do a bye week, blah, blah, blah. No. The NFL's keeping it simple. It's going to be based on winning percentages and
potentially a neutral field.
If they make it to, say, the AFC Championship and it's the Chiefs who benefited from all this versus one of the two teams affected by this postponement or cancellation, it would be in a neutral territory. And let's just say they play each other in the divisional round. That game, they have to make a decision.
Possible.
Would that then be in Cleveland? Because it would be between
Detroit,
Buffalo and Cincinnati, or Detroit.
Or Indianapolis. I've already touched too much on this. It's not obviously our main focus of this episode is to talk about DAMAR HAMLIN, and I'm not wanting to take any attention away from that. And I've probably spent too much time on talking about this perceived play that I felt was dirty. And I want to make sure that this is clarified. In no way am I trying to state that Higgins made a dirty play on DAMAR HAMLIN because it was just a normal football play. Just like people have been talking about, and the Hamlin family is stressed that they don't want to see any negativity that some individuals have sent towards Higgins as if he was trying to purposely hurt Hamlin. That's
look, you're playing football.
False.
You've got someone tackling you. You go for a little pop. Yeah. You're not trying to ever hurt somebody.
The play
or kill
we're talking
them.
about that the defensive end rolls into Josh Allen's ankle is completely different than the play in which
correct.
DAMAR HAMLIN got seriously injured. So I just want to clarify that. With that said, past everything we've talked about here, past anything, what matters is that this afternoon we got awesome news in that last night DAMAR HAMLIN was able to wake up on his own. He was able to hold on and grip the hands of his loved ones that were around him.
Yeah, respond to commands of wiggling your toes. So they gave him something where he can write out questions or answers, and his first question:
Did we win?
Did we win? That's when the Bills knew he was cognitive. There was brain function, because that's a big problem when you lose oxygen. The first thing I said yesterday or during the game was brain damage. This could ultimately be a really bad thing. Even if he survives, he might be a vegetable. That's not the case. They said that there's...
The doctor said that not only is the light on, but someone's home.
And I love that phrase, especially when he said, did we win? He said, you won the game of life. So the game, nobody won, right? It's been canceled. I don't know if the numbers matter. It complicated fantasy football, complicated everything. But in that moment...
Yeah. And all of that doesn't matter.
The only thing that's mattered, actually, a lot of fantasy owners and winners have donated their money to a charity, which we're going to get into. It humanized these athletes, these players, these guys we get pissed off about when they lay an egg on our fantasy roster when we're in a semifinal or something. None of that mattered. These guys, the NFL is a brotherhood, a fraternity, and nothing showed it more than that demonstration on the field of them kneeling, them crying together, hugging together. It's so physical. And then in the moment like that, you forget about it all. And it brought me back to a moment when I was a kid and Pop Warner, we're in the car. I'm getting into a fight with my younger brother, Kyle. He's directly younger than me. I'm the middle of 5 boys. And I wanted to kick his ass. Well, he was getting lippy with me, and they called him Cannonball. He was this short little nothing. Now he's the tallest kid in our family. I had him in a headlock, and I'm just like punching him in the top of his head. And we get to practice, and we both have to run laps and whatnot. He's actually playing Pee-wees, and I'm on the midget level, which is the next stage. It's like 9 through 12. Point is, he broke his leg in that practice. And you know who the first one was over there?
You.
The first one, emotionally distraught, consoling him and being there for him as the ambulance is coming by and picking him up? Me. Because nothing else mattered. If you have brothers, sisters, siblings, whatever, friends, cousins that matter to you, even if you're upset about something trivial, what mattered was this man was fighting for his life and he didn't even know it. And he went from being 100% on oxygen to his Uncle Dorian telling everyone that they knocked it down to only 50%, which means he had some of that oxygen coming through his system on his own. And that was the first good sign, because when they sedated him, they had to actually cool them down too. And it was a 24 to 48 hour process, which can be up to 72 hours, which is 3 days. He's number 3. And after that 3rd day, we got this news, and it lifted the whole team up, and now they can focus on actually playing a game this weekend against the Patriots.
I haven't been watching football as long as many people. I've been watching it for about 25 years, seriously. And I remember growing up in elementary school, and there was a VHS tape that I watched at my best friend's house. And it was the bloopers, and it was also all the big hits. Like, they had one VHS that was the football funnies, the NFL's football follies.
Yeah.
And then they had one that was the NFL's like football's biggest bone crushing hits. You know?
And back when you can actually hit.
Yeah, and look, there's still, I know for a fact from reading on the interwebs and comments that there are still people that cling on with a pride, a false sense of pride of next man up and dust it off and rub some dirt on it and or cart them off the field and keep the show going. There's still people that despite what just happened to DAMAR HAMLIN, there's still people that truly want to cling on to that. I don't know if it, masculinity, or that's how your dad raised you, or you grew up with a lot of brothers, or your dad,
You call me out?
No, but it's like, I think what I'm trying to get at is that it's awesome that we've come this far as a society where we're make no mistake, we're still watching a game that on some levels is much like being back in the Colosseum in the Roman days and watching some brutality, because you do have to be desensitized to it. And we've all, I think, I speak for myself here, I've become desensitized to watching this game. I know it because of how I responded when this first happened watching the broadcast. We had watched the nickel cornerback go down.
Taron Johnson went
Taron
out.
Johnson. And we're like, you got to be kidding me, because we already talked this whole season about how snake bit we feel as far as injuries go. So he gets a concussion, and again, that is serious. But it was pretty much to protocol, and he got up, and they took him to the tent, and we're just talking like, oh my god, like what's next, right? And then Hamlin goes down, and I don't see him fall limp, so all I saw was him laying down, and selfishly, as a fan that's wanting my team to win and try to get this one seed that's so important, all I thought about at first, past, obviously thinking that maybe it's a concussion or something's going on, I'm like, oh my God, like what more can this team deal with? And now is this going to affect us getting a win? And that's like, I had to look myself in the mirror after this game, because...
Yeah, but you did a lot of self-reflection. And within an hour, when I started talking about, hey, we could do a live show here, we're talking to the owner, you're like, I can't focus on anything else right now. Because I was trying out. For me, everyone copes differently. I was already shell-shocked. I've played, little league, high school, college. I've seen people taken off in stretchers and whatnot. You always get the thumbs up, though, right? Or you later on hear that they weren't paralyzed, or at least that they're alive. Mm-hmm. In this case, I'm trying to distract myself and talk to you, and you're like, man, I can't focus. And I respect you for that, man. It was weird, because at the bar, I have a clip I'm going to play where I just pulled out my phone. I know it seems inappropriate, but I wanted to capture that moment and never forget it. Not that I need to capture it to forget or remember it. It's like I start on the TV, and then I pan over, and then I pan over to the other side, and no one's moving. Hardly anyone's doing anything but watching the TV. Booger McFarland's talking, and it's pretty much dead silent otherwise. If they're looking on their phone maybe for updates on Twitter. It was scary.
We play a violent game. Yeah. And, damn. Yeah. You just hate to see it. That's all. I just pray for the young man. Pray for his family right now. That's all I can say.
The ambulance was out there for a long time. Yeah. 10 minutes seemed like an hour.
Yeah, we have a lot more to talk about than just my, internalization of all this. And it's not about me and how I feel or about how you feel. But it's much like watching violence on TV, right? And you watch violent movies, or you watch action movies, and you see people die. And then if you were to see that in real life, it's going to maybe feel a little bit different than if you were to just watch it on TV, right? And I feel like that's kind of, as a fan of football, that's especially even with fantasy football, and you're always paying attention to who's injured and who's not, and an injury can derail your season. And again, so trivial,
yes,
in the grand scheme of a person's livelihood and their family and their life. But I'm just saying, yeah, it really struck me where I'm like, God, like, this is how I've reacted to this stuff, and I've gotten so used to seeing players get hurt and seeing, like, even the Tua thing, and like we talked about. So it was a way for me to reflect on it personally. And let's give a shout out again to first and foremost to the first responders on the field. I feel like we'll get to the doctors, and they have their part in this, and they need to be commended. But without EMTs and the training staff of both teams, you wouldn't have a chance to get DAMAR HAMLIN to the hospital. So like we mentioned, Denny Kellington, assistant trainer for the Buffalo Bills. You have Nate Bresky, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, head athletic trainer for the Bills. Tabani Richards, assistant athletic trainer for the Bills. Leslie Bison.
That would be fitting.
Leslie Bisson. Again, I hope I'm not butchering these names. Medical director. You had Mark Kim and Tom White, who are internists. And then you have for the Bengals medical staff, Matt Summers, who is also out on the field. So let's give a shout out to all of them for working magic. You want to talk about pressure.
Award winning. I mean, they deserve.
You're in front of 50,000, 60,000 plus people. All eyes are on you, and people are wondering what's going on. And you have to be perfect. You have to be on it and know exactly what you're doing and know what you need and command. You want to talk about leadership. You got to command and let people know what you need. And they got the defibrillators out there, and they were doing CPR
within seconds. You saw Denny reach over on his walkie-talkie or whatever it was, and call over for an AED, and they had it to him just like that. When I watched it back, you could see Hamlin where his body wasn't moving, and then his body started to arch on his own. That was his body going into shock and basically seizing. And that's when they're like, okay, we don't know. That's why they treaded lightly with this and took their time giving updates and going through tests, because they weren't sure neurologically how this was going to work out. And for him to come through and say, did we win? Not only did he form a sentence, but he was thinking about the game, and he put the game first, which is crazy.
Thing, though, think about it though. In his mind, because
he was still there. Yeah,
he didn't realize until someone told him that more than 2 days had passed.
Yeah.
To him, he probably thought he thought it was probably still the evening of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, you're in a medically induced coma.
Yep.
And so he had to be told, like, and he was shocked. He's like, oh my God, like I've kind of been out of the world for 2 days, 2+ days. So it's got to be such a surreal. You want to talk about a surreal feeling. But then not only does he get to hold the hands of his family members for the first time in more than 48 hours, and then he gets told that he just won the game of life, and then he gets told that his fundraising campaign, that he probably was the last thing he was thinking about at that moment, and it's raised over $7 million.
It's close to $8 million now, and he started this fundraiser, Chasing M's Foundation, in 2020 at the University of Pittsburgh, where he attended college and got a bachelor's degree, and he had a goal of $2,500 on GoFundMe for this, and he wakes up to $7.6 million. Mm-hmm. We had tons of donators. You had Chris Jericho, and you had Tom Brady and Robert Kraft and all these guys.
Beautiful part about it is that you've got
Andy Dalton.
You have all walks of life contributing. You've got very famous people, athletes, former athletes. You've got fantasy football groups. You've got just regular people that are football fans that have been touched by this in some way. Bills Mafia, Bengals fans, football fans of all 32 teams. It's been a galvanizing situation. And this country we live in can be very divisive, and we all have our opinions, and we have that right. That's part of our freedom of being an American. And I think, though, too often it takes tragedy to bring people together or to agree on something. I think this could be a reminder to not just let tragedy and the unexpected be a reason to unite and do good things by each other.
Yeah, let your friends and family know that you love them, you care, that you're there for them. They might need something. In this case, the NFL reached out to the players and have offered additional mental health doctors and therapists, and I think that's crucial, because even more so than maybe DAMAR HAMLIN, because he didn't even know what he was going through at the time. He was fighting for his life, but mentally he wasn't aware until now, and now he has to wake up to all this reality, knowing that Paycor Stadium turned their lights blue that night, that they had vigils for him, and there were players of every team around the country praying for him. And
Hard Rock Stadium made their lights blue and red.
All 32 teams changed their Twitter bio or photos to DAMAR HAMLIN's jersey and number and pray for DAMAR.
Foxborough changed their lights to blue and red. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Niagara Falls had their lights blue. I mean, that's more local for Buffalo, but there was just stuff everywhere. And this athlete who was 6'1", 200 pounds, in his second year in the NFL, drafted in the 6th round, He was a great athlete since he was a child, actually, and he grew up playing with Dane Jackson since they were 7 or 8. They played with and against each other, went to Pitt together, playing the pros on the same team together. And Dane had also been carted off in an ambulance earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And now this to be switched, it's just wild to think that this can happen to even these guys. And when it did, everyone came together, and it was just 2 miles from the University of Cincinnati's medical center. And when the ambulance, once they got him in there, they waited for his mother to come down from the stands, and then they took him. Who knows what was going to happen? If that was going to be his last moment, she wanted to be there.
Yeah, his dad, I think, was with him too.
Yeah, the father came as well. They got there. A bunch of reporters showed up. Stephon Diggs showed up on his own to the hospital. Zach Taylor came in from the Cincinnati Bengals and checked on him, or tried to do their best to be there. All we could do was make this more aware to more people, share the GoFundMe, donate, pray. You know, he's got a long battle. He's still technically in critical condition. There's a lot of things he has to do before he can be stabilized. That game was watched by 24 million people. It was the most watched Monday Night Football game ever on ABC, ESPN, ESPN2. I don't even know, was Manningcast going during that? I haven't seen any reactions to that.
It's a good question. I do not
Wow.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is since it's been on ABC's network in 2006, this was the highest Nielsen rating they've ever had. And obviously people tuned into this to find out what was going on. From 8:30 until 10 o'clock Eastern, we didn't know at all what was up until that ambulance left, and then we knew officially the game was postponed. And it's just crazy to see all of this happen so quickly. But yet now there's a bunch of positive things, and the Bills can actually focus on a game this weekend.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're even talking about that, because even yesterday we were talking about not filming, and if we were going to film, it was just going to be a quick tribute to DAMAR. And now we can actually talk about the Patriots in an episode without feeling sick to our stomach, because the players are moving forward. They had their first practice on Thursday, where it wasn't just a walkthrough. They actually had equipment on, and they were running through plays, because it went from pray for DAMAR to now play for DAMAR. And I feel bad for the Patriots, because if they win, they're in the playoffs. There's a very slim chance that the Bills allow the Patriots to win this game.
There's a lot to be inspired by with all that has happened. I'm proud of all the good that this situation has brought out in people. Football is a lot about masculinity. It's a lot about being tough and out-muscling the man across from you, and about winning in the trenches. But I think what happened on Monday night, first of all, it shows what leadership does. And Zach Taylor and
Sean McDermott.
Both exemplified what the NFL has become. I think that there are coaches that would have felt the pressure to continue. And maybe that's a bold statement. I don't want to say how another man would have acted when he saw his own player down like that. But I just feel like there is that pressure to continue, and that show must go on mentality that is ingrained still in many sports and in the NFL. I think that could have been easy to let that overtake your emotions. And I'm so proud of having a leader like McDermott and
Coach
like Taylor. Yeah, you want to talk about
Coach of the Year.
Both of them handled that with
grace. Zach Taylor came over once the two refs came over to him to consult him, or, ask him about what he wanted to do. He came over to talk to McDermott and completely put it in McDermott's hands. At that point, he was still shook. You could see. At first, he was like, okay, here's an injury. He's going to get carried off. What are we going to do about replacing him? And then it went to, holy shit, my players just witnessed this guy die on the field. And now we've got to regroup and figure out what we're doing with life. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted to go out there, because when you're hesitant on the field with these guys going at full speed, you're going to injure yourself. And I mentioned that there could be further injuries. It was dangerous to go back out and play. McDermott gave the option to the players. We can continue if you guys want, or we can go in the locker room and we'll figure it out. And obviously the players all came together and agreed that they could not play. And nobody blames them. Nobody ever. Well, apparently some people wanted to blame T. Higgins. Again, we're not putting blame on anyone. It was a freak accident that happened. It was literally a split second like that. Like you said, I think it's even more rare than being struck by lightning. It couldn't have happened to a better team with a better coach. and better medical staff and be in that spot in Cincinnati, right where actually Ryan Shazier, his injury with the Steelers was in that same stadium.
Antonio
Brown?
Yeah, Antonio Brown's injury happened in that stadium.
Wow.
There was another. No, yeah, there was another injury that's happened in that stadium too.
I started thinking about all the scenarios. We get caught up in fantasy football lineups, in scheduling for the NFL. Is this going to be made up? Seeding, like what place are we going to be in now? We might be screwed. Yeah, we talked about that stuff. Either way, 1, 2, and 3 before that game have not changed. Will not change until these next games are played, and it may not at all. If all 3 teams win, they stay 1, 2, 3. Where Bills are 2 instead of 1. They were 1. The Chiefs temporarily took over 1 until we were maybe going to win. If we didn't win, then it got complicated with the Bengals possibly still getting the number 1 seed. All that is pretty much irrelevant. Now, the only thing that blows my mind is that Mahomes has never played a playoff game in his career in the NFL outside of Kansas City. Mm-hmm. So if there's a little bit of an opportunity for the Bills to get home field advantage still, which they will as a divisional winner until they play someone like the Chiefs, I want it to be somewhat neutralized, and that's what they're working on. By the time this goes up, maybe they already announced it because there's games on Saturday, and they want to decide that before then. And if you want to know more about DAMAR, right? A lot of people started, because for the first 24 hours, there wasn't much of an update. So everyone started learning about him. And I think that's great. When you've got a guy who's 24 years old in his second year of a 4-year rookie contract, a guy who was a 4-star athlete out of high school, played high school in Pittsburgh, played college in Pittsburgh, and then made it to the pros in Buffalo, which isn't too far. He wanted to play in Pittsburgh in college because he wanted to be there as a role model for his brother and be close to family, because he's super close to family. When reporters were asking players around the team who had the most swag on the team, like Kyle Brandt had brought up, it was Stephon Diggs 1, which is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And number 2 was always DAMAR HAMLIN, because he dressed very well, he carried himself well, always had a smile on his face, never came in with negative energy, was always supportive and loving to his teammates. And when something like this happens, you never wish injury upon anyone. Earlier in this season, actually just weeks prior on One Bills Live, DAMAR HAMLIN had mentioned that, this is bigger than football. Life is bigger. And he's proven it. And he's fighting for his life still. And I'm just glad that there's some upside.
It gets thrown around so much in sports, and like you'll hear it in football, how this team really mimics the attitude of their head coach. Well, despite the terror and the nightmare that took place on the field in Cincinnati Monday night, you got to see front and center that everything that's been said about the Bills and Sean McDermott is 100% accurate. He's a leader of men. He is a man of faith. He cares about his players like family. And you saw that in how he handled it and how he led the team and made sure that he wasn't going to put them in a compromising position after seeing Hamlin laying on the field, getting literally resuscitated to life. And then you saw a team where I told you this week, family, we are family gets brought up a lot outside of your actual direct family.
Yeah, a lot of cliches.
There's a lot of it thrown around at the workplace, especially. And I know there's plenty of you out there that have heard that at the workplace, where we're family, and none of it gets backed up, and it's all just a facade, and it's a bunch of bullshit. When the Bills say that they're family, you can't deny it after you saw how they reacted on Monday night, and the way they reacted, and the fact that they formed a circle around Hamlin to give him privacy, and some of them had to turn their backs to him. Because they didn't want to see, but like to guard from not only people in the stands, but from the broadcast, and just to make sure that it was just private. Man, if there was any doubt before Monday night, if this team loved each other and would go to battle for each other, literally take a bullet for each other, I think that all doubts were put to rest with how that happened. And again, just one last thing I wanted to say. Again, I know we mentioned some of a play that I perceived as dirty, and that's trivial to the grand scheme of what we wanted to get conveyed tonight. Overall, I can't be more impressed with the Bengals organization, and there's parallels between our fan bases with the 2017 ending of the playoffs and donating to Andy Dalton's foundation. But man, from what we saw and what many people saw watching the broadcast, it was absolute class from all the fans. There was no complaining, there was no yelling, there was no fighting. Nope. It just there was Bengals fans that were making signs in real time to honor Hamlin in the moment.
That was very classy.
Yeah, so talk about an absolute class act of a fan base. There's some negativity that's been brought out in this, but it's been overshadowed by the good in humanity, and I think that's the whole point of all this, is that through this you've gotten to see, it's kind of like the ending of the Dark Knight Rises, where the Joker wants to try to convince Batman that the humanity's falling apart and it'll eat itself. And it's like then the way this all played out is just like the way that movie played out. The Joker was not the last one laughing, and it turns out that humanity, the good in humanity, outpowered the bad.
Yeah.
So,
well, a lot of people used to mock McDermott about trust the process. I fully trust the process. I am pot committed. I am in. I believe in him. He is a leader of men. He's taken us to the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years. And he's done so many things right. He's learned a lot. I mean, you remember his time management and some of the crap early on? He wasn't aggressive at all. And then now he takes risks at times, and he trusts his players. That is super important.
And to me, that means he listens. He listens to his staff, and he listens to his players.
Yes.
And that's why he's so well respected.
Nothing would be more poetic than the Bills playing the Bengals in the divisional round and getting that matchup anyway. And for DAMAR maybe to recover by then enough to be able to watch, or maybe even be there, to have the Ring of Honor or somebody like Denny Kellington come out there and give out toys for the GoFundMe toy charity for DAMAR's charity. And just all this stuff to happen anyway. And for the Bills, after dealing with the top shooting and then the 2 deadly blizzards and storms coming through Buffalo, and all of the injuries we've talked about every episode before this one. In 27 episodes, we've talked about injuries.
What did I tell you when we were walking out of the bar Monday night? I told you I thought the worst that could happen in this game and all the buildup was that we lost and didn't have a good a chance at the 1 seed.
Yeah.
And it turns out that wasn't the worst that could happen.
Losing a player,
was
losing humanity. And if the Bills could make it to the Super Bowl and win it for him, let's say DAMAR never plays football again. I mean, it would be amazing if he came back from this. Chris Pronger is a hockey player, and back in early 2000-something, he had the same exact injury. This is a very common baseball injury where you hit it right, and during that right part of the heartbeat, and you go into cardiac arrest. And he dropped on the ice, right? So a lot of teams and leagues changed their policies, which is why doctors were no longer in the suites. They were down on the ice, behind the bench, near it. That's what happened here, was the paramedics were right there. They had their equipment, and they were out there in seconds, and they saved a man's life. And now we look at this all differently. The players, this weekend will prove whether they could truly get over that or not. And even if they have hang-ups, it's going to be quite understandable. Even if they lose to the Patriots, who gives a crap? We didn't care at all if we had a forfeit. At this point, it wasn't about the 1 seed. It was about, are our players okay? Are they okay? Are the coaches okay? So DAMAR Hamlin is neurologically intact as of right now. He's passing all tests that he needs to up to this point, and hopefully we have better news and better news and better news, and then we get to see where this young man's life goes, and the team can all rally behind him and with him. And
the rest of this year doesn't have to be a Hollywood story. It doesn't have to be a movie story. It's going to be a Buffalo story, and no matter how it ends, we are all in this together, no matter whether we get to the Super Bowl or don't get to the Super Bowl. We're with the city of Buffalo, and the fans are together, and it's no matter what, hell or high water, it's going to be a Buffalo story. That's all that matters.
Well, I feel like, being his second year in and money not really being guaranteed, which is another story, he got a degree in communications. As long as everything works out here, if he never even touches his foot on the field again, everyone knows his name now. And he can make a name for himself in the communications world, maybe on television. I think it would be amazing to see him at least have a career somewhere rather than be left in the dark, which I don't think will ever happen. I mean, he seems like an amazing young man. I don't know him personally. You don't either. But you don't have to. I mean, we welcome him into our living room watching these games, into bars and pubs around the world, and now he's in our heart.
No, and to me, well, and also to a lot of us didn't know who he was or didn't know him specifically or by name, and maybe this is another good reminder to like get to know people before something happens. You know, don't let something like this happen to get to know someone or to do some research. And yeah, it makes it easier when something like this happens because the focus is on them. But yeah, like it just goes to show that, you know, it's kind of like we were talking about, to not let heartbreak lead to galvanizing people all the time, and get to know people before stuff like this happens, because they all are human beings after all, and they're not just part of a cog in the system that is the NFL. They all have feelings and personalities and families, and they're their own person. So
he's a great guy, and I hope he's able to completely come back from this. I mean, he was no slouch, whether you knew his name or not. If you're not even a Bills fan, you probably don't know who he is. Or if you watch Pittsburgh games in college, he filled in for Micah Hyde, who got injured week 2. He played in 15 games, started 14 of them, and really came on. He was an aggressive tackler. He played fearlessly. I've even mentioned that he sacrificed his body in the past. And
physical player.
Very physical. And, we want to thank him for his contributions to the team, and everyone who's contributed to his toy drive, and all the positive energy that's been sent out there. We send a bunch of that as well.
Did we mention the doctor, Dr. Pritz?
We did not.
Okay.
We did say that when DAMAR asked who won, and Dr. Pritz was the one who said, "You won. You won the game of life." And they've come back through and talked about how he's made these strides, and he's really made, there's been a turning point. And that's what we all needed to hear today. That's what the players needed to hear. When Josh Allen and McDermott spoke today, McDermott got choked up. Allen even sounded a bit congested, like he had been crying, and he admitted that even these grown physical men, get soft and hug and are there for each other, because there's actually something manly about being secure with who you are, and speaking your mind, and being vulnerable. And we could all learn a lesson from this. And that's really all I have to say about all this. I mean, it's been somber. I love football. I get excited for it. But all I could think about this week was this. I couldn't sleep right. I mean, I'm not even a player on the team, but it was hard to sleep without waking up in the middle of the night and checking Twitter for an update, because we're on the West Coast. We're 3 hours behind them waking up and having news updates. And early this morning, I woke up to a great update.
Monday night started what was a weird week for a lot of people, and now finally getting some good news about Hamlin kind of brought back some kind of normalcy, I hope. To everyone, and this kind of this routine and your schedule, and even for the players.
He will forever have a tie-in with the NFL, the Buffalo Bills, us, his hometown to McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. They are forever changed.
Shout out to the doctors, and also, look, the doctors are equally important, but I just feel like EMTs don't get enough love. Man, shout out to the EMTs. I feel like in a lot of towns and cities in this country, EMTs might kind of go under the radar. I don't think a lot of them probably don't get paid enough. They're working crazy hours.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a stressful, pressure-filled job, and they're dealing with the general public, and they're, dealing with the homeless population, and you're dealing with trying to literally make sure that you can get someone to the hospital and make sure that they stay alive. I just feel like what an unheralded position that can be. So shout out to all the EMTs out there as well as the doctors.
That goes for any first responder, paramedics, firefighters, all of you. And it's an unbelievable thing to have everyone come together. And really, we're just repeating ourselves at this point. It was an incredible thing to see and continue to see. And we hope that by the end of the year there's a happy ending. With that being said, obviously I don't have a card out here. It says pray for DAMAR, but I did have a card here, and this is Josh Allen Kaboom. This is a reprint. It's the only reprint that I believe I have of all the cards I have, whether it's Josh Allen or not. and it is a 1 of 10 gold Kaboom of 2021, I want to say. Yep.
How much would an actual card of that be worth?
$5 to $7 grand.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 1 of 10 super short print gold. It's not the normal silver hollow. And you brought your
I
own.
brought one from my own personal collection. A lot of these are from Scott's collection, and for good reason. He's got an amazing, elaborate collection. This one is from my personal one. This is my favorite card.
You're very proud.
I am very proud of this card. I thought about this card for weeks and months. I would literally look on it online every single day, and I was like,
gotta get it.
I was debating, like, when should I pull the trigger? And so yeah, this is a Josh Allen rookie 2018 Black Friday. It's got the new era from his cap, the new era tag from his rookie hat, and super awesome graphics. I don't know. It's a cool, unique card. It's numbered 13 of 25, so that would be a super short print.
Yeah.
It's my favorite card. I will never sell this card. It's gonna either just stay with me, or if I ever have a kid, it'll eventually go to them.
Beautiful. You know, one thing I don't want to see in the comments or anywhere online anymore are the anti-vaxxers or the naysayers, all the people talking about T. Higgins. Like, let's just end that.
Yeah, no room for any negativity. You know, you keep those comments to yourself or somewhere else, but yeah, not here. I don't want to hear that, yeah.
If this is your first time watching, we are two guys that are obviously Buffalo Bills fanatics. We're located in Portland, Oregon, and we cover the Buffalo Bills, but we talk about every other game in the league. After we get done talking about the Bills, we usually do a quick recap about other games that are going on, and we do that with our preview and our recap. We do a prediction each week of how we think the Bills are going to do. We try to stay honest, but we're homers. We'll be honest. I mean, we've only picked a couple losses, and they've only lost a couple.
When your team wins 12, 13 games a year,
but
it helps.
I'm Scott. This is Greg. It's not just a Bills podcast. We talk about fantasy football stuff as well, and we talk about the other teams. So you're welcome to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. But for now,
Bills Mafia, stay safe out there. Keep on building each other up. Let's keep the good vibes going. Today was an awesome day for the entire community of Buffalo, and everyone there needs it. The community has been through a lot, and Monday night was going to be a release and something to distract us, and it's not what we expected, but if there's any city that can take it on the chin and become stronger for it, it's Buffalo, because you don't make excuses.
All right, well, there's only one more thing, Greg. Let's go!
Buffalo! All right.